Well, welcome everybody to Sabbath School today, and how lovely it is to see the sun shining again. I just want to just have a little prayer, and then I'm going to share some of a little story with you that I'm sure you will all enjoy. So let's just bow our heads. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you. Thank you for the sun. Thank you for the rain which we need, but we've had enough, and we're just really enjoying the sun and the warmth of your love and the welcome that we get when we come to our church. Help us as our Sabbath school today, as we study, help us to keep our faith strong and to remember that what we should be doing is asking what we can do for you rather than what you can do for us. In your name, amen. Imagine if you were given the job of painting the second church ever built in Sydney. The year is 1810, and you're given a little rowboat and you're pushed off from where the Opera House now stands, and you row across the harbour, and when you get to whereabouts the harbour bridge is now, you look behind and you see the church right in the middle, right on Church Hill, a dominant church, but sadly became to be known as the ugliest church in Christendom. So how did that second church, St Philip's, come to be built? Well, if you're ever down near Hunter Street, you've probably seen this memorial. So what's this memorial all about? Well, you've actually got to start a bit earlier, because you've actually got to start with the First Fleet. The First Fleet trip. Now, how many of you knew that after it left Portsmouth, it went to Rio de Janeiro? And then from Rio de Janeiro to Cape Town, and then on to Sydney. And when it arrived in Sydney, Sydney pretty much looked like this. And you might be able to see where they raised the Union Jack, and on the 26th of January 1788 they proclaimed Australia, the colony of New South Wales, as being British territory. So what's all that got to do with the church? Well, there was one outstanding man in that fleet. He was the Reverend Richard Johnson, and he had been specially chosen to be the chaplain of the First Fleet. He'd been selected by William Wilberforce and John Newton, and they wanted someone who was going to be a real evangelist for the fleet. They knew that there was a big reform progress in train, and they wanted to make sure that whoever they settled there, they're going to be educated, reformed, and given a second chance. And this man, Richard Johnson, was a godly man. And if you go back to that memorial that you can still see in Sydney, it clearly says that what all that is about is that the very first Christian service ever held in Australia was just 8 days after Australia was proclaimed. So on the 3rd of February 1788, the first Christian service was held where you see that little memorial now in Sydney. And I think it's rather significant that the memorial probably used to look quite grand, but now most people don't even know it's there. And it's dwarfed and surrounded and shaded by imposing buildings. But imagine if you had arrived in Sydney in 1788, having been on a trip lasting 250 days, in which 3% of the people that set off died, and you had to have the first Christian service. What is the text that you would select? I think a lot of them would probably be, my God, why have you forsaken me? But Richard Johnson selected this text from Psalms. What shall I render unto the Lord for all of his benefits? And what does it really mean? What it really means is, what can I do for God because of what he has given to us. And after that journey, I just think that is the most amazing choice of text. And no wonder he went on to make a real impression, because not only did he have the first Christian service on that spot, he was determined that that is where the very first Christian church was going to be built. And he couldn't persuade any of the governors to give him any money. They said there are much more important things to do. And so for 4 years, he knew he was knocking his head up against a brick wall. So he went out farming, and he made a fortune. In fact, they said he was probably the best farmer in New South Wales. And so he said, well, I'm not going to get money from the government. I'm going to build this church myself. And so he built the first church, and it cost him £67. And the government didn't give him any money towards it for another 4 years. And it was quite a big church. It seated 500 people, it had a thatched roof, dirt floors, and during the week, he and his wife educated the children at school. So what happened to this church? Well, let me tell you that this church was the subject of vandalism. It was the first Sunday laws ever passed. The governor made a proclamation that everyone had to go to church on Sunday. The army, everyone in the colony, the convicts, and of course you can imagine how much enthusiasm that was greeted with, so much so they actually burnt the church down. And it then took quite a while for the second church, this one that I've shown you, to be built. And as you can see, it was profoundly ugly. It was so ugly, in fact, that no one liked it, and they started planning and building a new church. But where this church is built, you can still see the spot today, because Lang Park, not far away, on what's called Church Hill, is still there. And we took our grandkids there and had a pizza, and there's a little monument there marking where the ugliest church in Christendom was built. And while it was being used, they realised that it was so ugly they had to get another church, and so they planned the current church, which is the oldest church in the New South Wales, St Philip's, called St Philip's because, of course, the first governor was Arthur Phillip, and they thought by naming him Philip that they'd get some money, which of course they never did. But the church across the road from where you have that little park is still there, and it's a beautiful church inside, but very rarely used these days. But what I found when I was studying this is a hidden treasure, because the most valuable thing in this church is not what you can see in this picture, because in the safe they have 2 documents, 2 books that were saved from the original church. The original Bible and Common Prayer book, brought out with the First Fleet, were in the church when it was set on fire, and were the only 2 things rescued. And although they were a bit damaged by fire, they are now kept in the safe of St Philip's Church. And they think it's so significant that every time someone from the royal family comes to New South Wales, they take these books out, take them down to Parliament House, and they get them to sign. The first member of royalty was Edward, who later abdicated in 1920. Then Queen Elizabeth's father and mother both signed it in 1927. The Queen signed it a couple of times when she's been out here. Andrew and Sarah have signed it. Charles and Diana have signed it. And more lately, of course, our beloved Kate and William have signed it. But when you actually see the names of those people that have signed it, we've got a lot of confidence, haven't we, that we don't have to put our confidence in them, that we have our confidence in our God. And I was thinking today, what should our text be going into the lesson? And I can't think of a better text than the one that was first read back on the 3rd of February 1788. And the thought today I leave with you is, what can you do for God because of what he's done for you? And I think with that thought, it's a great way to usher in the study of our lesson. And we really invite you all to go to our classes and to study those beloved chapters that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. So we've got a lesson in here, we've got a lesson class down here, and there's one out here and one outside as well. So enjoy your Sabbath, God bless you, and again, I leave you with the wonderful faith that we have in our God, and to know that indeed we can have a Father that just loves us and blesses us. Even though we can look around this old world and see just what a terrible state it's in, we know that the best days are yet to come. So God bless.